Good morning and welcome everyone to today's webinar. One moment while I get my guests up onto the stage. Cool, there we go. You're welcome for everyone that's already online. Thanks for popping on. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat before we get started. It's nice to know who we're talking to. I'll just wait for Andrew to get up on the stage. One moment. Cool. Hi, Andrew. How are you doing? Good.
Hello.
Cool. Yeah. So welcome everyone to the Relab webinar. I'm your host, Stacey, the content manager here at Relab. Before I properly introduce our guest and while people are still popping onto the webinar, I'll just cover off some webinar admin. First off, you'll see the chat channel in the right-hand side. If you'd like to go and introduce yourself, we'd love to know who we're talking to. And please pop any questions throughout the webinar. I will get to those at the end. And the webinar will be about 45 minutes with those question time included. We also have Lou from the Relab team to monitor the chat. So if you've got any technical issues while watching, she'll be able to help you out. And lastly, yes, this webinar is recorded for anyone watching. It will be in your inbox later today. We'll also be posting it on our YouTube and Facebook if you want to watch over there as well. Cool. So today I'm joined by Andrew Crosby, CEO of Universal Homes. Welcome, Andrew, and thank you for taking your time to talking to us and give your insight. This morning we've got a really great webinar talking all about property development trends of this year, the factors that are influencing development, and what might change your decisions, how MDRS is being addressed at Universal Homes, and also what's coming up next for Universal Homes. So let's get into it. For some context on Andrew's background, he's been in property development for over 20 years in both the public and private sectors. He also lectures property development at Unitec and is a founder of the Urban Development Institute of New Zealand. So Andrew, to start us off, can you tell us a bit about your career so far and what drives you to working in property?
I never wanted to work. First what I wanted to do is become a pilot. So I tried to get in the Air Force, but the black budget of 1991 with Ruth Richardson meant they shut down the university cadet scheme at Wigram in Christchurch and canned that idea. So then I didn't know what to do. So I went to university, did architecture. I was useless at that. And then sort of changed into a property degree, and then pretty much since then have been working in property development with a few sort of sideways moves into IT and hotels and bits and pieces. So that's that background. Yeah, I just want to build as many houses as possible. Really, that's the driving approach, and wherever I get to do that is what I'm aiming for. So. No, I don't really, affordable housing, yeah, fine, sure. Solve the world's problems, sure. I just want to build as many houses as possible.
Can you give us an overview of Universal Homes, what Universal Homes does and what they aim to achieve?
So Universal Homes was started in 1959 by a guy called Bill Zabritsky. And he became a property developer / evangelist. So he became a sort of religious sermon. So he would have been an interesting character. He built about sort of 15,000 houses in the 60s and 70s. So we basically Universal built Henderson and Avondale, and then other various parts around, mainly Auckland, but also around the country. We would have been the second biggest builder in New Zealand after Fletcher's in those years. And then he sold to Chase Corp. Chase Corp was a private equity firm in the 80s. Chase Corp went bankrupt. Universal was an asset along the toll road that ended up getting sold to Singaporeans. And then they ended up selling on to a Chinese entity, which is my board now. So Universal Homes is actually owned by the Chinese government, if you Google far enough. But the board that I operate under is called China Merchants Shikao. Shikao is a little suburb in Shenzhen, which is across the border from Hong Kong. And it was the first free trade area in China in 1978. And China Merchants Shikao was set up to be the first capitalist sort of thing that China did. So my head office built basically what has now become Shenzhen. So they started it off. And they own other businesses around the world. We're doing a mixed-use development in Belarus. They're doing a port city thing in Djibouti. And I think we're doing a $6 billion piece of land in Hong Kong, which we're a third share of. So that's the board. And then Universal Homes, we're a little while property developer down in New Zealand. So we're not a group home builder. We buy land, design houses, build them, sell them in that order. And in the recent generations, we've been doing somewhere between 200 and 400 houses a year. At the moment, we have one large development at Westgate, which will be 1,500 homes. We're about 300 in, hoping to get to 200 a year just out of that development, which would be quite difficult to achieve. We've built 1,000 homes at Hobsonville Point. So we're one of the first builders there. So we've built 1,000 homes there. At the moment, we've got another 90 apartments under construction in Northcote. We've got some other stuff in the future coming up in Northcote and Milldale, Oraraka. Some of it's Kiwi build related.
Awesome. I didn't realize how global everything was. And so Universal Homes is that, do they work from the start to the finish of the whole process of development? From buy?
Yeah, from paddock. Yeah, from farmland to fence post.
Awesome.
From so we do. So Westgate is probably one of New Zealand's largest projects where we're doing everything.
Cool.
Whereas most large land developers will cut up sections and sell them to home builders, we're doing the home building as well.
It's interesting to know where people start and stop in that process. A lot has been happening in the industry at the moment, particularly with MDRS, lending changes, restrictions, and increasing costs. I guess the list probably goes on. But what are the main factors that are influencing yourself and Universal Homes at the moment to maybe, I don't know, whether you're adjusting your approach or rearranging your thinking around development and design?
Well, not that we want to, but literally this government has forced so many changes down the throats of councils that no one knows what's happening at the moment. It's just one. I represent the Urban Development Institute of New Zealand, and we had a seminar last night on the national policy statement on, I can't remember what it's called, on plan changes. There's a national policy statement on urban development. There's the new medium density residential standards, which basically suffocates whatever the councils have put decades into working about. There's productive land, there's wetlands. My guy that goes, it's like I'm doing a submission every week. So really the government has just turned in, and there's still the Resource Management Act, which they're pretending to reevaluate as well. So the amount of change in town planning in the last few years, especially this year, in the last 2 years, has been unbelievable. It's just, and basically all it's done is it just adds costs. Every time you change stuff, it adds costs. You might think you're making it easier, but the plan change to medium density residential, Auckland Council have now come up with proposed amendments or proposed way of dealing with it by saying, do your 3 houses on a single site, that's fine. That's what the government says. But for anything larger, we now got all these extra rules. So ironically, for anything 4+ units in Auckland, according to the current council documentation, which is out for consultation, it's going to be harder, which means more expensive to do developments larger than 4 units. We project that for every 20 units we could have done, we'd probably only be able to do 17 or 18 now. So, and that just adds to cost. So, and you know, council have got good reasons for doing this because they're worried about greenery and a whole lot of other issues. But you know, government blanket rules are pretty short-sighted in my opinion. And it just change after change after change. So as far as adjusting, we want to be careful not to adjust too early because things are changing so dramatically. there's small scale developers already putting consents in for medium density residential standards, and getting them approved or close to being approved. So that all sort of works. But for larger developers, it's just getting harder. And then you've got transport. Auckland Transport and NZTA are basically a disgrace. Getting anything done out of them, it's just so time consuming, and they keep changing the rules. And each time they change a road rule, we've got to change the rain garden or change the way we do something. It just means thousands and thousands of dollars in fees. So lots to moan about. So it's changing our business model. What we have done is Universal Homes would have been primarily single family homes until 2012. And then we went to Hobsonville. We started off at single family, but we quite quickly went into terrace homes. So, 80% of our product 2 years ago was terrace homes. Now we're moving into 3-story walk-ups and more apartment product as well. With the current market, that probably will die, and we'll probably go back to more terrace homes. Because usually when the market dies, ironically, people go towards less density, not higher density. Because the only way to justify the higher construction costs is you can't justify higher construction costs. So apartments will die, more people will be doing terraces. Some terraces will die, more people will be doing single family homes. Big subdivisions down south, which had a whole lot of 2- and 3-story proposed terrace houses, will end up being single family homes for all.
So it kind of goes in this massive cycle of going round and round to each development type. How do you, that is a lot. I guess we've been doing webinars and different content around the medium density rules, and I feel like we could do a webinar every week for that, which is quite interesting. But it is a lot to take on board. Do you have any advice for smaller developers who might be trying to get a handle on things at the moment?
Join the Urban Development Institute of New Zealand, because we're putting out regular information. There's a good group of planners there who are doing stuff for free. I mean, last night we had a good hour session on this sort of stuff. Just try and keep up to date. The problem is that even the medium density residential standards, if you've got a qualifying site, you can do that now. But for anything larger, it's going to be not until 2024 that the rules are fully embedded. Between now and 2024, Council have said they'll be taking more and more emphasis on the proposed rules. But it's really, I hate to say it, you just have to pay more money on consultants to try and figure it through and do stuff as quickly as possible on the rules that are current at the day. I mean, one of the obvious things that's going to happen with the medium density residential standards is nothing to do with new houses. It's all about existing houses will get wider. In affluent neighbourhoods, where views and outlook are a priority, because of the height in relation to boundary rules are much, much more lenient, you'll see houses getting wider. If you walk down Mount Maunganui Beach and all those mansions on the beachfront, you'll see them instantly getting wider, because it's cheaper to go wider, and the most valuable real estate is where you've got a sea view or a park view or an ocean view. And you can go much closer to the boundary, and that's what people will do. So no one who owns a home in Auckland, unless you're on a cliff or on the edge of a park that won't be sold, or on the edge of the ocean, all views are up for grabs now, especially around places like Remuera and Glendowie, St Heliers, anywhere of the hill. So it's going to be interesting. So the advice to small developers: join unions. You get to hang out with a whole lot of people from various capacities in the industry. And you get to know this stuff for free, I mean, it's interesting now, because even with this natural policy statement on productive land and plan changes, there's 2 of them. Some of the future urban land, especially in Takanini, because there's a whole lot of flood zones, might be put back, might be excluded from development. So people paid $100 a metre for land that might be worth $10 a metre. So you're really taking, it's interesting. Yeah. It's interesting. The unitary plan took about 3 or 4 years to kick in. before anyone saw any value uplift from what the results were. And I think the same will happen with this medium density stuff as well, because especially if it's in a down market.
Yeah. Do you think?
Yeah. Someone's got some questions. Any questions? Or?
Yeah. I'll get to those at the end.
Oh, no.
But I just have another question. Do you think that people will delay a lot of their developments at the moment because of everything changing, or do you think people just go ahead and just try to achieve what they can?
Now the market's crashed. Development stopped. So if you're doing government developments, that's different. But as far as private development, that stopped. So what do I mean by that? That means anyone who bought land in 2021 now has something worth a lot less. If they went and got it consented, the consent might be useless and worthless. The market was still hot till about January, February this year. So a lot of projects kicked off based on that. So terrace homes, they'll be finishing between now and the next few months, and apartments might not finish till the end of next year. So this thing's got a long tail. So even with these price drops that have happened, it could be, you don't see development slow down for potentially another year. But new projects pretty much, I guarantee, have stopped. And now it's not every project. We're starting some, we're doing some. The big guys will do some because we just got to keep trading through. But most people will simply not be able to get finance from a bank because nothing will stack up. So it's interesting times. So not to be doom and gloom, but yeah, private property development is stopping dramatically. There just seems to be a lot underway because it's still under construction. So and the main reason is people, most property developers have to get pre-sales and then have to get bank funding, and then they start construction. People like us and Fletchers, etc., don't need that. We just make a decision. So our decision on Northcote was it's tough, it's tight, but we can worry about that in 18 months' time, really. But most developers don't have that luxury. But there's pockets. Some people will still do things and set a new price and still get stuff off the ground. I mean, it doesn't stop. But I'm just saying there's a lot that will stop. There's a lot of risk out there at the marketplace, especially builders who've purchased lots and lots of sections in outlying areas. With sales, how do they pay for those sections?
Yeah.
So.
I'll try to change the tune a bit. Do you think there's any positives that are to come out of these changes eventually?
The density changes. I actually think the unitary plan was perfectly fine. I think they've thrown the baby out the bathwater, and now council have hit back to the government. They're fighting. Government and council are fighting. They've hit back with regulations that make it harder than a unitary plan to develop. So there's no positive there. You can get 3 houses on a site, but you can't subdivide without a resource consent. So they need to fix that little issue up. And there's no design controls. So you're going to have a lot of disgruntled neighbours, and they won't really know until something starts going up next to them. I believe in less government intervention. Just get the hell out of the way. That's my fundamental theory on things, even though we're doing stuff with Kiwi Build and stuff. But now they've raised the Kiwi Build price caps, and some of them look above market. So they've thrown that out away as well. So especially for apartments. So but look, when the people come back to New Zealand and the immigration starts flowing the other way, and we need more houses and stuff, we will all deal with it and sort it through. But I think there's a little bit of pain ahead.
Yeah. So we do have some questions here. What's the difference between 3-story houses versus terrace?
Oh, okay. So you have can't draw on this thing, can I? I'm always drawing pictures. Look, a house is just a standalone house. Just think of a section or a piece of land, and you stick a house in the middle of it. right? It can be 1 story, 2 story, or 3 stories. A terrace house is where you've got a piece of land and you stick 2 houses together and they share a wall. So it's a standalone and then a terrace, and they join together and they share a wall in the middle. And that makes a duplex. And then if you've got 3 houses joined together, then it's a terrace home. So that's the difference. It is typically about the same. It's about the same money to build a terrace house with a wall between the 2 different terraces as it is to build a standalone house with its own wall, because the standalone house might have extra money on windows and things like that, but the terrace house has to have a bit more complicated design to protect houses in between. The reason you do terrace houses is because you can get more houses on the site. That's the fundamental reason. You can pump more properties in. So that's what I mean by a terrace house. And then apartments, obviously, where you're splitting it horizontally. So you have a single level dwelling and you might have 3 levels of those. A terrace house, you could have a terrace house which is 1 level or 2 levels or 3 levels or 4 levels or higher. You have 6 levels in New York.
Do you often split those across one site to provide like a variety in your projects?
Yeah, so in West Hills, the first 94 houses we did was a mixture of standalone and duplexes and only a few terraces. And we sold those down, but that was in 2018. There wasn't a great market. So the second stage we pumped, and it was along more of an arterial road as well, the second stage. So we just pumped a lot more terraces in. It's all terraces, a lot of two bedroom terraces, about 60%, which we're a bit worried about, but they all flew out. They sold really well because they first homeowners like those and investors, but we don't have many investors. And then for our stage that we're currently building, we've got a mix of terraces and duplexes, and I think there's a couple of standalones. And basically the reason for the mix was, don't know what the market's doing, let's just hedge our bets both ways. But we made the decision on what we're building at West Hills now. So we started building 1 year ago, or just at the end of last year. But the decision on what we're going to build was done at least a year or 18 months prior to that. And that was in a different market. So you make a decision on one market and then you get 2 years later to build it. Some developers, depending on what you're doing, some developers buy these brownfield sites in town and they can put the same product on there and they can start building within, within a year or 8-9 months after they first even look at the site. But that's very difficult in greenfield. That's very difficult in sort of the scale that we do.
And how do you find the difference in cost between 2 and 3 story terraces, and then compared with going up to 3 story walk-ups?
Okay, so there is a cost. So the number dynamics sort of work like this. Let's say a 2-story house of 100 square meters, 2-story terrace of 100 square meters might cost $3,000 a meter. If you squeeze that 100 square meters into 3 levels, so 33, then that might cost $3,500 a square meter. I'm making the numbers up a little bit. And the reason being is that when you go higher, there's extra scaffold costs more. 3 levels of scaffolding. You got to scaffold everything in New Zealand. You have to put more bracing in the lower ground floor, which could quite easily mean that you have to jump to a steel portal. And if you're doing a skinny 4 or 5 meter wide house, and you want a ranch slide and a door, there's not a lot of places to put bracing. You can do a real horrible, real skinny sort of door, which some people do. So you have to put a steel portal to allow for the bracing on the lower level. So that adds extra cost. Just things are higher and more expensive. So typically it costs more to build a 3-story than a 2-story. And then similarly, it's more to cost a 2-story than a 1-story. And also just bear in mind that you've got more stairs as well. So you've got less usable area in that house because you've got to take it up in stairs. Standalone, single family, single dwelling, single level house has no stairs. So it's less common area, and common area is sort of wasted sort of space. And then the jump from 3-level terraces to 3-level walk-up apartments is another considerable jump, maybe another $1,000. Now we're talking $4,500 a square meter. And I won't get into the dynamics of the cost because it depends what you include or exclude. But the main issue there is not only do you have an inter-tenancy wall vertically, you also have inter-tenancy walls horizontally. And so then you're making decisions, should I do it out of wood? Should I do it out of steel? Should I do it out of concrete? So you're juggling all these decisions where you really would think about that for 2-level. And also a 3-level, there's more weight, and that could impact your foundations and piles. So we just had to cough up about $1.5 million that we weren't expecting on piles in Northcote that had to be screwed 13 metres into the ground because of the geotech came back a lot worse than we expected. So that's why, that's the fundamental reason. And then if you go higher than that, it's more cost again. In our experience, the most uneconomical buildings to build are 4, 5, and 6-story buildings because they've got all the extra costs with high-rise commercial type construction, but they don't have enough units to justify the sort of the land value and the construction cost. But what you'll find if in the down cycle is apartments stop first, and those apartment sites will do nothing or turn into terraces. Then there'll be terrace sites which turn into duplexes or do nothing. And then there'll be duplex sites that turn into standalone, and there'll be standalone 2-level which turns into standalone single level. So this happens every cycle all around the world. You have a situation where less density is the only financially feasible thing to do.
Another question here, is there an oversupply of homes?
Yeah. Of course there is. Excluding people living in motels and all the social housing stuff, which I just had breakfast with Patrick Doherty this morning. They're building 4,000 houses this year. So they'll get on top of that eventually. But there's no occupants. There's no. If you try and rent a place in Auckland now, there are no tenants. And there's still thousands of houses coming on stream. I mean, we've got 200 of them under construction at the moment. So you just look around outside, you'll see buildings are still getting finished. You look at a building, it might have 50 homes. So there's 50 families that are going to move into those. Where are they coming from? They're renting now, or they own a house that's going to go on the market. So the true measure of housing demand is occupant demand. It's not how many investors are in the marketplace. It's not house sales. House sales got nothing to do with it. It's occupants. And if houses aren't selling and houses aren't renting very fast because of lack of demand, then there's not enough people to fill these houses. So we've got too many houses. Plus, it's getting worse because migration was negative 12,000. All the people who've been saving up for their OE for 4 years will finally bugger off now. And probably most people who were going to come home already did during COVID. Although that changes. It's interesting times.
There was another question, going back to what we were talking about before. Is it possible to explain the reasons for the crash?
Well, there's an oversupply nationwide issue in regards to South Island. What supply, like Queenstown, rental almost nil. Yeah, I think Queenstown is a different animal. Look, you can't. We've looked at Queenstown. Queenstown it might as well be Fiji. It's an island on its own. It's completely different. Don't know much about the South Island. I just can't believe there's much stuff gets built in Christchurch and it gets spilled. So who knows? But Auckland certainly, there's too much. There's too much product. Remember that the CBD's got no one living in it either. There's all that CBD product that you don't really hear about that much. So, we need the tourists back. We need the immigrants back. We need the English language students back. We need all that stuff. Christchurch is going off in terms of development. Yeah, it is. Who's living in these things? I'd be very interested to know. So is there reasons for the crash? Well, 2018 was a really difficult market. By the end of 2019, it's got slightly better because interest rates were coming down. there was a bit on the horizon, and a lot of us developers had slowed down building in 2018 and 19. So there's a bit of pent up demand. Remember, immigration was running at, what was it running at? 70,000 or something like that, net migration. I can't remember, a huge number. And then COVID hit, and I thought it was all going to turn to custard, but the opposite happened. Interest rates plummeted. Everyone bought houses. Everyone bought batches. They also bought cars and spas and everything else. And so that we had the good times for 2020 and 2021, and now we've got to pay the piper. Inflation's out of the thing. Interest rates have skyrocketed, and now we had a false amplified situation during COVID, and now we've got we went that way, and now we're going that way. And how long we go that way, I was thinking that interest rates looked like they were slowing down. But the last 2 weeks in America has scared everyone, because their inflation has just gone through the roof, and they keep rising rates. So who knows how much pain there is? But it's not going to stay like this. It's going to come back up. Everyone says a plateau. There's no such thing as a plateau in property, but it will feel like a plateau for many people. But it will come back up. It's just we went too high. Now we're going to go down too low, and it will pop up. I mean, it's not getting cheaper to build. There's been rampant inflation, 20, 30, 40% in building a house over the last year. And some for the reasons that people don't expect. In 2018, 2019, and 2020, there was no inflation in construction costs. And you could do competitive deals. Then it all hit. And not only has stuff gone up in the price, but you can't do as many competitive deals with builders. That's the main reason for a big spike. But we're seeing steel and concrete and all those things, I think, getting a bit better. Freight's being improved a little bit. So the construction cost escalation won't keep going. I think that's plateauing. It might even come back a little bit. But typically what happens is it doesn't come back too much because people just go bust. So countering that, a lot of developers have made a lot of money in the last couple of years. So as long as they didn't overextend themselves, they're in quite a good position. Fortunately, some of the ones I've talked to, they're just going to spend 2 years on holiday and come back when the market improves. Look, I've been through a few of these things now. I was in the GFC in America, and you go from you're busy all day long to literally doing nothing. When you're a developer and nothing's feasible, there's nothing to do, zero. You got to get creative. And that means looking at existing assets and all that stuff. But the good news is houses are so expensive to build that that the land value is less relevant. So, But I've been through these. Yeah. So it's tough. Everyone's, I think, cash flow is king.
Yeah.
Best time to buy a house. Absolute best time to buy a house. Absolutely, without doubt. The best time to buy a house I've ever seen in my life. There's just no competition for most stuff out there. And you can if you do enough offers, you'll strike a good deal. And I sell new houses, but my question for people is, your first house, was your first car a brand new car? Your first house does not need a brand new house. Go and buy a house that's been decimated by the politicians' tax penalty, right? The house was built before March 21 of this tax penalty now. Go buy one of those, a brick and tile unit, and strike an amazing deal now, and then spend every weekend doing it up. Stop drinking your lattes and your avocado and toast and all that stuff. Get your sleeves rolled up, do some painting and some fencing and some carpet and all that stuff, and build equity that way, because there's just no competition for properties. And that flips on a coin. That before you wait too long, before you know it, that opportunity.
I'm in the first home buyers Facebook group, and I've seen heaps of questions lately being like, what should I compromise on? What should I not compromise on? And I think the same thing, just find anything. Anything will do. There's another good question. Any suggestions for small developers in the next couple of years?
I mean, there'll be plenty of you out there that are looking at this medium density residential standards and figuring out, how do I capitalize on this? So that's got 100% certainty now, because if your site has no qualifying matters, if it's not a flood zone or climate change or all this sort of stuff, you can do that now. Still a bit, I'm not sure about the subdivision side, but you can do that now. So I'm sure a lot of small developers are looking at that stuff. Here's a single family site. I can do 3 houses as of right. Let's pump them in. So there'll be new duplex models, and there's also another way of doing it. You can buy a site, for example, and then cut it into 2, and then on each of those 2, build 3. So you can very quickly go from 1 site to 6, manipulating the rules a little bit. So, I mean, I don't really have much advice for small developers, apart from a lot of them will be looking at that. And it's when this, I'll give you an example of something. We sold a house for $834,000 in February. That same house we sold effectively for $730 a month ago, and they're not flying out the window. Okay, sales have been dead for 4 months. Some companies out there have not had a sale since March. So it's interesting out there, and so it's a good time to buy. So my board said to me, well, if you can't sell these damn houses, Andrew, go and buy some land. So we're looking for land. So I've found $30 million, which we're going to go and buy some land. 15 on land, some desperation deals, hopefully, and then 15 million on deposits for land that we'll build in 25, 26, 27. And, we'll look at anything over about 10 units, but our sweet spot is sort of 50. Small developers, well, if you already own the land that you overpaid for, you can't do much about that. And unfortunately, the price has already dropped. It just won't show up in the data for a while. But if it's the old real estate time heals in real estate. So you just have to hold and wait it out, find some other angles. There's always people coming up with new ideas. So next generation's wealthiest multi-million-dollar developers will be figuring that out right now. They'll come through this, and they'll be the next generation.
Do you think you'll see a lot of people that have looked at their site now, just the property they own now, and be like, oh, maybe I can go and do something with this? Do you think we'll see a lot of like mum and dad developers starting up and things like that, or do you think it's too tricky to enter?
Well, there's companies out there advertising to these people to become mum and dad developers. There's builders who will tell you what you can do on your site, and then you can play developer. Development is risky business. It is risky business. You got enough money to build these things and are prepared to hold them because you can't sell them to make a profit, then that's fine. But most people, you look at grand designs, look at anyone just building their own house, they have enough trouble. You amplify that when you're building full sale development projects, okay? It gets hard, it's hard work. So unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but what happens in booming markets, everyone sees people doing it. A small builder who builds one house at a time, all of a sudden does duplexes, and all of a sudden he's got 10 units, and all of a sudden he's doing 30 houses, right? So he grows, gets bigger and bigger until it crash. Everyone sees their neighbours doing it. They decide to build a house, play property developer. Architects do, people in the industry do, and then other people do. And when you're not managing things very well and your costs are going up, but the sale prices are going up faster, it doesn't matter. Okay? That's Warren Buffett said, when the tide goes out, you'll see who's naked. Okay? And if you're an inexperienced property developer, it's going to be brutal on you. Unless you're rich enough to be able to take the good of the bad. So my suggestion is either you pre-sell it, then you might spend a couple $100,000 on some plans and stuff and try and pre-sell the property and then get it built. That's fine. Then you run the risk of costs exceeding your set price cap. Because it takes a bit of doing, and you'll see a lot of fly-by-nighters disappear during these times, because it's just too difficult. So you've got to be very careful doing that. you just might as well just sell the house, sell the site to a real developer. See what you get out of that. Yeah.
And where are we in the market now, do you think? I think that we're at the bottom of the Nike tick. Do you agree?
Oh, I think we're in prime buying. So that means close to maximum bloodbath. But this might go on for 6 months to a year because there's still product getting finished coming onto the marketplace. There's some developers quietly going under, some builders quietly going under. So we might be a bit early. But I wouldn't be, if I'm buying a house now, house prices in Auckland have already gone down 20%. So the time to get in is to start now and hook something up this side of Christmas or after Christmas. Don't try and wait till next winter thinking it's going to get worse. The data might show it getting worse, but the people have already jumped in and start to buy. So so it's like it's 5:25 on your clock or something maybe, but it could be a real slow, very very slow to get to 5:45. I mean I don't know. Look. We're a trading company. We've got to build houses. That's how we make our money. So we've just got to see ourselves through this. Someone said, would there be any correlation to the cookie cutter standard boring development and the slow state of rails? Are buyers looking for more individual, unique architecture? Look, human beings are greedy. Okay? Human beings are greedy. In this market, people are going after the lowest cost. Yeah, sure, they say the most value and all that sort of stuff and what looks good. They're going after the lowest cost. Primarily because that's all they can afford. That's all the bank will give them money for. So they all buy the shitty looking boring stuff. Some of us might be guilty of that. We're a little bit more boutique and we do 100 units. We make sure, every 4 or 5, it's like complete different developments. We pay for that privilege, but some stuff in Christchurch, there's a lot of stuff that looks exactly the same. A lot of it's sold to investors. God knows who's going to rent it. But maybe they'll find rental for those, and then those people will move out of other suburbs. So, yeah, there's pockets. So our buyers looking for more individual, unique architecture. But when the market's tough, when it's tight, when it's really vibrant, people will take what they can get. When the market crashes, they'll take what's cheapest. So it sort of doesn't, It's, I guess, does unique architecture sell? I guess, and different. It depends what market you're in. There's only so much you can do, really. So I find that, it matters at the fringes of cycles, but not at the top or the bottom of them. And now I'm not talking about. Obviously, you're building houses in St Heliers in Auckland with sea views or Herne Bay. That's a complete different market. That's something I don't know much about. And of course, it's all about architecture and views and prestige.
I'll make this the last question. Are you and other developers selling to Housing New Zealand at the moment?
Funny enough, I was just talking to one of the bosses there this morning for breakfast. No, we're not, because we don't want to put Housing New Zealand houses in our West Hills development. Simple as that. Even though there's a Salvation Army, you've got a social housing complex right next door, which is fine, that's good. But they have real stringent support for the people in those homes. Yep. There's no issues. So no, we won't be. But never say never. Some are. Yep, some can't sell in the private market. So people who've bought into developments now where maybe 8 out of 10 have sold might find that the 2 other ones are going to be sold to Housing New Zealand. Yep, I know people right now doing that right now. Yep, even more so, some whole development sites we sold to Housing New Zealand, which is fine, helps the developer out. But yeah, that's definitely happening. That's definitely growing.
Cool. And what's next for Universal Homes?
Well, we've got $30 million to spend on some land and some land deposits, and got to finish these houses in Westgate, start another 100 next year. Finish these houses in Northcote, start another 50 of those next year. Start in Milldale, start building our stuff in Milldale. There's about 70 odd going up there in the start of the next year. Some of it's market dependent, some of it will do anyway, and then some in Oroaka as well. So there's plenty on, and really pulling the trigger. Well, we've got everything we can build at the moment that we've got consent for. We're doing, so we haven't stopped. We're waiting on bloody consents, but. Will some of our projects we're planning to start next year depend on sales? Yeah, they will a little bit. Yeah.
Cool. Well, perfect. Thank you for all your insight. We'll wrap the webinar up there. Thank you to everyone for attending as well. Sounds like people were very interested in what you had to say. So that's cool. Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for joining us. And yeah, keep an eye out on the next webinar.
Yeah. And connect to me on LinkedIn, any other people looking at this webinar. So you'll hear it like it is.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Bye.